According to North Dakota's Department of Human Services, victims of trauma are 2.5 times more likely to smoke, 3 times more likely to experience depression, and 15 times more likely to attempt suicide. And according to the Sid One Institute, more than 70% of adults in the United States have experienced some form of trauma in their lifetime, with more than 13 million having some variation of PTSD. In 2017, Kogonada released his indie darling, Columbus, a film about a budding relationship between a working-class architect enthusiast who's aiding her recovering addict of a mother and the son of a well-renowned yet dying architect. Amongst many of the ideas discussed, such as the meaning of art and how places affect us, the main theme of the film finds focus in this: trauma, how it affects us, how we cope with it, and what can be done to end this hold it has on us. In this essay, I'll be discussing the way in which the wider themes of the film, such as the meaning of art and the turning point in our lives, are used to discuss these questions. One of the major themes of the film is the way escapism guides us during times of great pain and trauma. After realizing her mum has relapsed back into taking drugs, Casey finds one of her favorite buildings and begins showing it to Jin. The main thing she tells him is how she once came to this building at a time when her mother's addiction was at its worst and just stared at it, which gave her this weird sense of comfort she couldn't explain. Not only did it change her perspective on her hometown, but it gave her a form of escape, something bigger than herself to look up to, and for the first time in a long time, she felt fine. Is this the meaning of art? Whilst describing the effects the building had on her as the uses of a two-shot from behind, you can't see the pair's faces, only Casey's eyes reflecting in a rear-view mirror. Only being able to see Casey's eyes could suggest something internal deep within her soul that's being reflected back to her. It could parallel how the building revealed, reflected back to her this deep, soothing feeling. This form of escape, however, that's not really her. It's a version of her, a version of what she could be, staring right back at her. She hasn't figured this out yet because she refuses to see her calling as anything other than a form of escape. Presented is the conflict between two possible meanings of art: amusement art and magic art. Collingwood suggested that amusement is meant as an escape, literally to amuse, whereas magic art gives us something that can be sewed into our everyday lives. The aforementioned shot lasts for an unconventional amount of time, clocking in at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Through forcing the audience to be stuck looking at Casey's reflection could further suggest that she's also trapped in that feeling, in the escape that was reflected back to her. By using what clearly, for Casey, is on the side of magic art and forcing the character to view it as simply amusement, as something to numb the pain, Kogonada characterizes her in a state of internal confusion, which is the root of why she's still in Columbus. Once she stopped using it as an escape and dealt with her trauma head on, she was able to move forward. The way in which trauma and the individual are related is further developed through the use of location. When Jian asks if Casey's mum's on drugs, she keeps bouncing the question.
Sorry. That just sounds funny.
Funny how?
She can't bring herself to say it out loud. Casey eventually opens up, saying she believes her mum is addicted to shitheads. In her 2017 book on trauma within the family, Claudia Black suggested that when a parent suffers with the disease of addiction, his or her children frequently suffers with the addiction as well. And in this sense, I'd argue Casey is an addict as well. She's addicted to sticking her head in the sand to the distraction of architecture. In this moment, the moment when Casey opens up about her mother's addiction, the only source of light is her favourite building. The usage of low-key lighting presents how the only truth, the only thing that matters, is architecture. It's quite literally the brightness in the dark. During the addiction, during the trauma, it's always present, comforting her. It's also interesting how the light doesn't fully cover her face, it only goes halfway, which may suggest that despite the building, despite architecture being Casey's source of light, she's yet to fully embrace it. She still has one foot in the darkness. The trauma of witnessing her mother go down the route of drugs has caused Casey to never fully realize her need as a character, that one day she'd have to leave Columbus. Columbus as a city being made up of modernistic architecture, a mecca of modernism, links to Casey elevating herself in that it molded her to the point of knowing exactly what she wants to be in life, an architect, whilst also surrounding her with the distraction. It surrounded her to the point where she's literally being lit by her future while still being in the dark. In this, the film could be suggesting that the places that shape us are only there for that purpose. Once Columbus gave Casey the spark to press forward, she didn't need it anymore, despite how hard she held on. If there were one message behind this film, it would be this: just let go. Earlier I mentioned how Jin has trauma relating to his family, similarly to Casey. In this, I was referring to how Jin feels a sense of abandonment, lack of love, and rejection from his father. Due to his father being more focused on his work, architecture, Jin never got the love or attention he craved, and he still carries this trauma into adulthood. Towards the end of the film, during a heated argument, Jin is questioned by Casey about his relationship with his dying father.
You could do a lot better.
Then what? Taking care of my mom? You obviously don't get that, do you? Because you're here hoping that your dad dies so you don't have to mourn for him.
The scene begins with the pair exiting a park, entering a tunnel, which, in terms of its design, echoes the modernistic architecture featured throughout the film. As they enter this tunnel, exiting nature into a man-made piece of architecture, the argument begins, and the pair become surrounded, trapped by shadows and darkness, to the point where their faces lack any kind of detail. Architecture is surrounded with negative connotations of Jin. It's trapping for him due to having a father who cares more about a building than his own child. The issue brings out the darker side of his persona simply because he's trapped in the pain. In his essay about coping with trauma, John G. Allen stated how victims of trauma often use self-protective means as a shield from traumatic events, going on to say how trauma often results in cynicism, bitterness, alienation, and a loss of hope. In an attempt to escape from the trauma caused by his father, Jin ironically copied his father's behavior. He's become bitter, he's become one with the darkness, choosing not to care about anyone because he's too scared no one's out there. In order to answer the question of this essay, what does Columbus teach us about trauma, I would say this. The film presents this idea that the traumatized inevitably follow in the footsteps of the ones that brought them there. Casey remains addicted to her escapism, whilst Jin refuses to feel any kind of love. It's only when they let go of their past, of the things that created them, that they become a whole. It's interesting how Casey and Jin are from opposite ends of the class system, with Casey being very much working class, and Jin being the son of an internationally famous professor, with the two individuals still having high levels of trauma in relation to their families. The film presents trauma as something that transcends class, race, and gender, something that's rooted in our psyches, stopping anyone without bias. And in this, Columbus is a film about how anyone can overcome the pains of their past, how if one just lets go and moves forward, then they can only begin to heal.
You know, meth is a big thing here. Meth and modernism.
Meth is big everywhere. even in North Korea.